Millionaire and young son are reported missing until the cleaning lady. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. The March sun was still timidly rising over the streets of Oakwood when Sarah Johnson adjusted the strap of her worn fabric bag on her shoulder and quickened her pace down Maple Street. At 53 years old, she carried in her calloused hands the mark of someone who knew the value of honest work. Always short and clean nails, fingers slightly swollen from scrubbing, washing and ironing. That Saturday morning, as she had done for over 3 years, she was heading to the upscale apartment in Oakwood, where she worked as a cleaner. "Good morning, Mr. Smith," she greeted the doorman of the neighboring building, who was already sweeping the sidewalk. This was how Sarah built her days, with small acts of kindness that turned strangers into acquaintances and acquaintances into family. She loved Saturdays. The apartment was quieter, without the hustle of the owners during the week, and she could plan her tasks more calmly. It was also the day she took the opportunity to give that special touch to the cleaning, leaving everything spotless for the family's weekend. Sarah took pride in her work. Each room she left sparkling was a small victory, a reason for personal satisfaction. But that morning, when she turned the corner of Oak Avenue, something completely out of the ordinary made her steps slow down to a complete stop. There, sitting on the sidewalk of a quiet street, near an abandoned construction site, were 2 figures that seemed to have stepped out of a dream or a nightmare. A man of about 40, with slightly unkempt brown hair and a scruffy beard, wore a wrinkled dress shirt that must have once been white and a pair of dress pants with lost creases. Beside him, a boy of about 6 snuggled against his father's chest, wearing a dirty soccer team t-shirt and shorts that had seen better days. Both looked completely out of place for someone on the street at that hour. They were not regular homeless people, but individuals who had clearly spent the night outdoors. What caught Sarah's attention the most was the contrast. The man, despite his disheveled appearance, had hands that had never known manual labor. He wore a watch that, even dusty, seemed expensive. The boy, in turn, cried softly, but in a restrained manner, as if he had learned not to disturb. "Oh, my God," Sarah murmured, approaching slowly. Her maternal instinct, sharpened by years of caring for other people's children and remembering her own grown kids, spoke louder than any caution. The man looked up when he noticed her presence. His eyes were blue, tired, but still held a glimmer of dignity. For a moment, there was mutual embarrassment. He, ashamed to be in that situation, she, trying to process the unusual scene. "Excuse me." Sarah hesitated, searching for the right words. "Do you need anything? The boy is crying." David, though she didn't know his name yet, looked at his son and then at this woman of average height, with black hair tied in a simple bun, who gazed at him with a genuinely worried expression. There was something in her brown eyes that conveyed warmth, a kindness he hadn't seen in a long time. "No, it's nothing serious," he tried to respond, his voice hoarse. "It's just, we're going through a temporary situation." Sarah noticed that even in that condition, the man spoke politely, using correct English. It wasn't foolish pride, it was wounded dignity. She knew that difference well. "Temporary or not, a child can't be left on the street, sir." Her voice came out firmer than she expected, especially with this morning chill. "Have you been here since yesterday?" Ethan, the boy, lifted his tear-stained face and looked at Sarah with those big eyes that seemed to hold sorrows much greater than his age. "Auntie, I'm hungry," he said softly, as if apologizing for feeling a basic need. Sarah's heart broke. In that moment, she didn't see a wealthy man in trouble. She saw just a child needing care and a desperate father trying to maintain composure. "Listen here," she said, crouching down to be at their level. "My name is Sarah. I live nearby on 24th Avenue. It's a simple house, but it has a sofa, warm food and a shower. Would you like to come over for breakfast and clean up a bit?" David stared at her, surprised. In his world of business meetings and million-dollar contracts, selfless gestures were rare. His first reaction was to decline. The wounded pride screamed that he didn't need charity, but when he looked at Ethan, who was watching him with hope in his eyes, all resistance melted away. "I don't want to be a bother, ma'am. Sarah. And it's no bother at all. It's Saturday. I'm not in a hurry. Besides," she smiled for the first time, completely transforming her expression, "a hungry child is not a negotiation. It's an emergency." The boy let go of his father and, with the spontaneity typical of his age, reached out his little hand to Sarah. "I'm Ethan, and this is my dad, David." "Nice to meet you, Ethan." Sarah gently squeezed the small hand. "And you too, Mr. David." David stood up, still hesitant. "Miss Sarah, I don't know how to thank you, but—" "No need for thanks," she interrupted, already getting up and brushing the dust off her skirt. "Let's go. The bakery should be open by now, and I'll get some fresh bread." As they walked through the streets of Oakwood, Ethan in the middle, holding the hands of both adults, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the absurdity of the situation. How a seemingly affluent person had ended up on the street. Ethan was playing on the sidewalk with a child, but her nature prevented her from asking indiscreet questions. There would be time to understand later. Sarah's house was on a quiet street, with small but well-kept townhouses. Hers had a small porch with a few plants and a faded blue door. Inside, it was exactly as David imagined, simple but impeccably clean and organized. There was a two-seater sofa with a crocheted blanket, a bookshelf with some books and family photos, and a warm smell of a home filled with love. "You can use the bathroom over there," Sarah pointed to a narrow hallway. "There's a clean towel in the cabinet. In the meantime, I'll prepare a proper breakfast." When she was alone in the kitchen, Sarah leaned against the sink for a moment, trying to process what she had just done. She had brought two complete strangers into her home, driven only by an impulse to help. Her eldest daughter, Emily, always said she was too trusting, that one day it could lead to trouble. But looking out the kitchen window, seeing Ethan play with a stick in the little yard, she knew she had done the right thing. The breakfast was the first of many, moments that would change their lives forever. Sarah's kitchen table had never hosted such unusual guests. David, now with a clean face and combed hair, looked like a more human version of himself, although he still carried that distant look of someone bearing an invisible weight. Ethan, on the other hand, had completely transformed after the bath. His eyes sparkled with curiosity as he observed every detail of the simple home that welcomed him. Warm French bread, butter, cream cheese, ham, cheese. Sarah placed the items on the table with the care of someone preparing a meal for family, and freshly brewed coffee. "Ethan, do you drink coffee or would you prefer chocolate milk?" "Chocolate milk," the boy replied excitedly. It was the first time in days he showed enthusiasm for something. David watched the scene in silence, still processing the generosity of that woman. In his corporate world, every gesture had an ulterior motive, every invitation hid an agenda. There, in the small but cozy kitchen, he was faced with something he had forgotten existed: pure and simple kindness. "What does Mr. David do for a living?" Sarah asked while serving the coffee, her curiosity finally overcoming her. Discretion. He hesitated, stirring the sugar into the coffee. How to explain that just a few months ago he was the owner of a tech startup valued in the millions? How to say he had an apartment downtown and an imported car, but now he was there, depending on the charity of a housekeeper? "I worked in technology. I had a company." His voice came out low, laden with a sadness that Ethan knew well. "Had?" Sarah caught the verb tense. "What happened?" Ethan, nibbling on a piece of bread with butter, innocently interrupted. "Daddy lost everything. Aunt Marina went to Europe and said she wasn't coming back, and now we don't have a home anymore." David closed his eyes, the pain of his son's raw exposure of the truth being almost physical. Ethan. It's true, Dad. Miss Sarah is nice. You can tell her. The boy looked at Sarah with a trust that broke her heart. You're not going to leave too, are you? Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. The child was clearly traumatized by abandonment. I'm not going anywhere, my angel. This is my home, remember? She turned to David, who was avoiding her gaze. You don't have to share anything if you don't want to. But one thing I can guarantee, as long as you need a place to stay, this door is open. Miss Sarah, you don't even know me. How can you trust a stranger like this? Sarah paused, the coffee cup in her hands. You know what I've learned in 53 years of life, that we know a person not by what they have, but by what they do when they lose everything. She looked directly into his eyes. And you, even without a place to fall dead, were out there protecting your son. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. David felt something dissolve inside his chest. It had been so long since anyone saw him as anything beyond his financial achievements that he had forgotten what it felt like to be recognized simply as a human being. Did your ex-wife really leave? Sarah asked gently now. Marina always said she married me, not my problems. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. When things started to go wrong at the company, she became more and more distant. When she found out we could lose everything, she packed her bags and said she was going to Europe temporarily. That was 3 months ago. Ethan lowered his head. Mom said she would come get me when things got better. And they will get better, Sarah said firmly, taking the boy's small hand. But until then, you have a dad who loves you more than anything in the world, and now you have Aunt Sarah too. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. Sarah got up to answer, and David could hear part of the conversation. Hello? Oh, hi, Emily. No, honey, I can't go today. It's just that a situation came up here. No, it's nothing serious, just some friends who need help. Okay, we'll talk on Monday. Bye. When she returned, David was watching her with a strange expression. You cancelled a commitment for us. It was just a lunch with my daughter. She'll understand. Sarah sat back down. Family is like that, right? When needed, everyone helps each other. But we're not your family. Oh, aren't we? Sarah smiled. Then explain to me why I'm here treating you as if you were. Ethan, who had finished eating, slid off the chair and approached Sarah. Aunt Sarah, can I see your house? Of course, my dear. All right, just don't touch anything without asking, okay? As Ethan explored the room, David took the opportunity to speak more openly. Miss Johnson, I need you to understand something. I'm not a bum or a freeloader. What happened to me? It was a perfect storm. Wrong decisions, people I trusted too much, and... He paused. Maybe a bit of arrogance on my part. Everyone deserves a second chance, she replied simply. Where do you work? I'm a housekeeper. I've been working for a family in Oakwood for 3 years. Good family. They treat me well. I earn enough to live decently. Sarah noticed that he was listening to her with genuine attention, without the disguised disdain that some people showed when she talked about her profession. And before I ask, yes, I have a place for you to stay. The sofa turns into a bed, and I can arrange a little mattress for Ethan in my room. I can't accept that. It's too generous. It's not generosity, it's humanity. Her voice became more serious. Do you have anywhere to go? Any relatives? Any friends? David shook his head. Most of my friends disappeared when the problem started. Family. My parents died a few years ago, and I'm an only child. Then there's no discussion. Sarah gently tapped her fist on the table. You both stay here until you can get back on your feet. Ethan came running back from the room, his eyes shining. Aunt Sarah, you have a picture in a nurse's uniform. Sarah laughed. That was a long time ago, my angel. Before I became a housekeeper, I was a nursing technician. David looked at her in surprise. "You have a degree in nursing." "Technician," she corrected. "I worked for about 15 years at the General Hospital, but when my dad got sick, I had to leave to take care of him. When he passed away, it was already hard to go back to the hospital, so I started working in private homes." "And don't you want to go back?" Sarah shrugged. "Life takes us down paths we never imagined. Nowadays I have a good routine, employers who respect me. It's not bad." David became thoughtful. This woman had given up a career to care for her father, adapted to a new profession, and still maintained impressive generosity. He, who had always prided himself on his planning and control skills, was learning lessons of resilience from a housekeeper from Oakwood. "Aunt Sarah," Ethan tugged at her shirt, "can you teach me how to make hot chocolate like yours? It's really good." "Of course I can. Want to learn now?" As he watched Ethan climb onto a chair to reach the stove, with Sarah patiently guiding each movement, David felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of everything. The first week of April brought a routine that none of the three had thought possible. Sarah left for work at 7 in the morning, leaving David and Ethan with a few simple tasks: washing the breakfast dishes, watering the plants on the balcony, and keeping the house organized. For David, used to running a company with dozens of employees, taking care of those domestic details was a completely new experience, and surprisingly, therapeutic. "Dad, are you happy here?" Ethan asked one Thursday morning while they organized the living room after breakfast. David paused, the sofa cushion in his hands. "Why do you ask that, son?" "Because you don't keep looking at your phone all the time, and you sleep better here." It was true. In recent months, David had been glued to his phone, desperate for any opportunity to turn the crisis around. There, in Sarah's simple home, without the constant pressure from creditors and lawyers, he had rediscovered the pleasure of being present. "I like it here too, Ethan. Aunt Sarah is very special, isn't she?" "She makes oatmeal just like Grandma used to," the boy said, with that impossible nostalgia of childhood. "And she lets me help in the kitchen." When Sarah arrived that day, she found a scene that made her stop at the door. David was in the small backyard, trying to fix the outdoor faucet that had been leaking for months, while Ethan held the tools and gave technical advice with all the seriousness of his 6 years. "I told you to turn it left, Dad." "You're right, Engineer Ethan," David laughed, genuinely trying to loosen it in the direction his son indicated. "Look at this duo." Sarah couldn't hide her smile. "Did you manage to solve my faucet problem?" "Almost," Ethan announced proudly. "Dad is good at fixing broken things." David stood up, his hands dirty with grease, with a look of satisfaction that Sarah hadn't seen since she found them on the street. "I just needed a washer. I'll buy one at the hardware store tomorrow, and it will be good as new. You don't need to bother." "It's no bother, Miss Johnson. It's the least I can do." That night after dinner, while Ethan watched cartoons on the small TV in the living room, Sarah and David stayed chatting in the kitchen. That's when she noticed a pile of papers he was organizing on the table. "Business documents?" she asked, without excessive curiosity. "Yeah, trying to figure out where everything went wrong." David sighed. 3 years building something, and in 6 months it all collapsed. Sarah approached, observing the numbers and spreadsheets. To her surprise, she could understand much of what she was seeing. "Can I take a look?" David hesitated, not out of distrust, but out of shame. Showing his professional failures to someone he had started to deeply respect felt like exposing a wound. "If you don't mind," she gently insisted. For 40 minutes, Sarah examined the documents with an attention that intrigued David. She wasn't just reading, she was analyzing, comparing dates, doing mental calculations. She had a pen in hand and occasionally made notes in the margins. "Ms. Johnson, do you understand accounting?" She looked up from the papers, a bit embarrassed. "A little. Actually, I studied business administration before becoming a nursing technician." David stared at her, surprised. "How far did you go in school?" "Up to the 6th semester. I only had 2 more terms left to graduate." Sarah looked back at the papers, clearly uncomfortable with the topic. "But then my dad got sick, and I had to work to support the household and take care of him. I couldn't balance both." "And you never thought about finishing?" "Oh, David," she sighed, using his name for the first time. "After 40, life is already somewhat defined, right? I'm fine the way I am." But David now understood why she looked at those numbers with such familiarity. "What did you think of the documents?" Sarah hesitated before speaking. "Can I be honest?" "Please." "Your partner, this Rodrigo Mendez. The withdrawals he made from the company account don't match the dates of the reports he presented to you." David leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Look here." She pointed to 2 spreadsheets. "On January 15th, according to his report, you spent $40,000 on equipment, but the bank statement shows that the $40,000 was withdrawn on the 12th. And there's no corresponding invoice. It could be a typing error. It could. But look here too." Sarah flipped a few more pages. "In the February report, he says you invested $80,000 in digital marketing, but the company that did the work issued an invoice for only $50,000. Where are the other 30? David took the papers, examining them with a new perspective. How had he trusted Rodrigo so much that he never questioned the details? "Do you think—" "I don't think anything. I'm just pointing out that the numbers don't add up." Sarah was careful. "It could be a series of silly mistakes. But it could also mean that your partner isn't as trustworthy as you thought." Ethan appeared at the kitchen door, rubbing his eyes. "Aunt Sarah, the show is over. Can I sleep with you tonight?" "Of course, my love. Go brush your teeth and I'll be right there." When Ethan left, David continued examining the papers. "Sarah, you saved my life by taking me in here, and now you might be showing me why I lost everything." "I hope not. But if it is true, at least you'll know the truth." "How can I investigate this?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Do you still have access to the bank accounts?" "I do. I'm a co-owner of everything." "Then we can compare, transaction by transaction, what actually came out of the accounts with what's in his reports. If there are discrepancies, then you can decide what to do." David watched her with growing admiration. "Would you be willing to help me with this?" "Willing?" Sarah smiled. "I've already started." The next morning, Friday, Sarah informed that she would be arriving late from work because she had some business to take care of. David found it strange but didn't ask. When she returned at 7 in the evening, she brought an envelope. "What is this?" "Copies of the bank transactions for your company over the last 8 months. A friend of mine works at the bank and helped me get them." "Is that legal?" "You're a co-owner of the account. It's legal." Sarah sat at the kitchen table. "And I discovered something interesting. Your ex-partner made a series of transfers to a company called Tech Solutions USA. Have you heard of it?" David frowned. "Never heard of it." "Well, it was established exactly 4 months ago. Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" As she spoke, David felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger for being betrayed by someone he trusted, relief for discovering that his failure might not just be incompetence. "Sarah, how can I thank you for all this?" "Don't thank me yet. We need to be sure before jumping to conclusions." She organized the papers. "But if it is what I'm in thinking, your Rodrigo has a lot to explain." Ethan entered the kitchen, curious about the serious conversation between the adults. Are you talking about the bad man who took Daddy's money? David and Sarah exchanged surprised glances. How do you know about that, son? I heard you talking the other day, and I also heard when the man talked on the phone with Daddy that it wasn't his fault. Ethan climbed onto the chair next to his father. But I didn't like him. He always talked loudly and never looked at me. Sarah realized that children pick up much more than adults imagine. And what else do you remember about him, Ethan? He was always on the phone talking to someone named Robert, and once I saw him leaving the building with a folder that belonged to Daddy. David felt a chill. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way he preferred not to believe. May arrived with the first heavy rains of autumn, and along with them, news that would shake the recently established routine of the trio. Sarah came home that Tuesday with a more serious expression than usual, finding David and Ethan putting together a puzzle at the living room table, an activity that had become an afternoon tradition between them. "Aunt Sarah!" Ethan ran to hug her, as he did every day. "Look, we've already put together almost half of the castle." "How lovely, my dear," she replied. But David noticed that her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Did something happen at work?" he asked, already recognizing the signs of worry on her face. Sarah sighed, sitting heavily on the sofa. "Miss Smith called me in for a talk today. The apartment is going to be put up for sale." "What do you mean?" David set aside the puzzle pieces. Her husband was transferred to Washington, D.C. They're moving next month. Sarah took off her shoes, massaging her tired feet. She said she's very sorry, that she would like to take me with her. But there they will live in a smaller house and won't need a housekeeper. Ethan, who had picked up on the gravity of the conversation, approached Sarah. "Are you going to be out of work, Aunt?" "I'm going to have to look for another one, sweetheart. But don't worry, everything will be fine." David felt his stomach tighten. In recent months, he had grown accustomed to the stability that Sarah Johnson represented, not just the roof over their heads, but the feeling of safety and care. Now, discovering that she was also facing uncertainties made her realize how dependent she had become on their generosity. "Did they give you a deadline?" she asked. 15 days. Ms. Smith said she would give me a recommendation letter and try to refer me to some of her friends, but... Sarah shrugged. "A steady job like this isn't easy to find." "And can't Mr. Robert hire you at his company?" suggested Ethan. Innocently, Sarah and David exchanged glances. In recent weeks, they had continued investigating the irregularities in the company's documents, and the findings were increasingly concerning. Robert's partner, seemed to be involved in the embezzlement scheme. "It's not that simple, Ethan," David explained gently. "Dad's company is going through some problems." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah and David stayed up late talking in the kitchen. The rain pounded against the window, creating a melancholic soundtrack for their worries. "David, I need to be honest with you," Sarah said, stirring the now cold coffee in her mug. "I have a little money saved up. It's not much, but it can cover the household expenses for a couple of months. Enough time for me to find another job." "Sarah, I can't accept that you use your savings for our sake. It's not because of you. It's because you have become family to me." She looked him straight in the eye. "Do you think I could sleep peacefully knowing that Ethan is going without?" David felt a lump in his throat. "And I feel useless for not being able to help. 42 years old, a family man, and depending on the kindness of others." "Listen to me," Sarah leaned forward, her voice becoming firmer. "You are not useless. You're going through a tough phase, just like everyone does in life. The difference is that some are ashamed to ask for help and end up sinking alone." "But how will I repay everything you're doing?" By being the present father that Ethan needs, by uncovering the truth about what happened to your company, and when all this is over, by being a better man than you were before. The next morning, David woke up with a determination he hadn't felt in months. While Sarah got ready for another work day, now counted, he had an idea. "Sarah, do you have a computer?" "I have an old laptop that my daughter gave me. Why?" "I want to try something. I'm going to look up information about Tech Solutions USA online, and I'm also going to call some old suppliers of the company to see if I can find out more about Robert's movements." "Do you think that's safe? What if he finds out you're investigating?" David smiled for the first time in days. "He thinks I'm down and out, unable to react. That's exactly what gives me the advantage." While Sarah worked, David spent the day immersed in research. The old laptop was slow, but functional. First, he investigated Tech Solutions USA and found that the company had been registered by Robert Johnson, the same Robert that Ethan had heard in Robert's phone conversations. Further investigation revealed that Robert had been a minority partner in 2 other companies that had suspiciously gone bankrupt in recent years. The pattern was always the same. He entered as an investor, gained the trust of the main partners, and then the companies faced unexplained crises. "Dad, did you find the bad guy?" Ethan asked during lunch, watching his father surrounded by papers and the open laptop. "I'm getting close, son, but now it's like a detective game. We need to piece together all the clues before saying anything." In the afternoon, David called James, a supplier of equipment who had worked with his company for 2 years. "David, man, it's been a while since I heard from you. How's the company?" "Complicated, James. That's why I'm calling. I wanted to clarify something about some equipment you supplied us in January." "January? Let me check. Oh yes, I remember, but it was strange." "Strange how?" "You guys requested a quote for $40,000 in equipment, but when it came time for delivery, the guy who received it, I think it was Robert, said he changed his mind and only wanted $20,000. He cancelled half the order at the last minute." David's heart raced. "And the payment? Did you receive 40 or 20,000? "Oh, we received the 20,000 just fine. Why do you ask?" After hanging up, David stood still for a moment, processing the information. Robert had cancelled half the order, but kept the total amount on the company's books. Where had the $20,000 gone? When Sarah arrived, she found David agitated, with a new pile of notes on the table. "Did you discover something?" "I found out that my former partner is even worse than we imagined, and that we're more alike than I'd like to admit." "How so?" David shared his discoveries of the day, then added, "You know what bothers me the most? I was so focused on big deals, on elaborate strategies, that I never paid attention to the details. If I had been more present, more attentive, maybe I would have uncovered the scheme sooner." "Or maybe he was too clever to hide it," suggested Sarah. "Dishonest people have practice in deceiving." "Yeah. But from now on, if I can rebuild anything, it will be different. It will be with my feet on the ground, paying attention to people and not just numbers." Ethan, who was playing with his toy cars on the living room floor, commented without looking up, "Dad, you're cooler now. Before you were always nervous on the phone." The innocent observation from his son hit David like a punch to the stomach. He had been so absorbed in his ambitions that he hadn't realized how much he was neglecting the people around him. "Thank you for telling me that, Ethan. Dad promises he won't get angry on the phone anymore." That night, when the rain started pouring again, the 3 of them snuggled on the couch to watch a movie on television. In the middle of the session, Ethan fell asleep between Sarah and David, his little head resting on her leg. "He trusts you more than anyone else," David whispered. "And I would protect him with my life," Sarah replied, stroking the boy's hair. "You both." It was at that moment that David realized his feelings for Sarah had evolved far beyond gratitude. May was coming to an end when Sarah worked her last day at the Oakwood apartment. Miss Smith, visibly emotional, handed her an envelope with a generous tip and the promised letter of recommendation. "Sarah, you know that if it were up to me, I would take you with me, right?" said the employer, holding her hands. "You took care of our family as if it were your own. I will never forget that." "Thank you for everything, Miss Smith. You always treated me with so much kindness and respect." On the bus back home, Sarah looked out the window at the familiar streets of New York and thought about how drastically her life had changed. 2 months ago, her biggest worry was deciding whether to buy beef or chicken for Sunday lunch. Now, she had 2 people depending on her, no steady job, but strangely happier than she remembered being in years. When she arrived home, she found David and Ethan in the kitchen, preparing what was clearly a surprise. The table was set with the best they had, the crocheted tablecloth she saved for special occasions, lit candles, and a delicious smell of homemade food in the air. "Surprise!" shouted Ethan, running to hug her. "Dad made lasagna, and I helped." "Oh my God!" Sarah put her hands to her chest, genuinely surprised. "You cooked?" David appeared in the kitchen doorway, an improvised apron tied around his waist and a proud expression on his face. "Welcome to our private restaurant. Table reserved for the most special lady in the house." "David, you didn't have to?" "We did." He pulled out a chair for her to sit. "Today is your last day at your old job. Tomorrow starts a new phase for all of us." During dinner, Ethan chattered excitedly about how he helped prepare the dough, how he almost spilled the sauce, and how Dad discovered he could cook. Sarah watched the interaction between father and son, noticing how David was different, more present, more patient, more human. "And there's dessert too," announced Ethan when they finished the main course. "Flan," revealed David, "with a little help from YouTube and a lot of supervision from Chef Ethan here." Sarah felt her eyes welling up. "You guys are silly, making me cry." "Are they good tears?" Ethan asked, concerned. "The best tears in the world, my love." After Ethan went to bed, Sarah and David stayed on the small porch, watching the quiet night of Oakwood. It was the first time in weeks they talked without business papers scattered between them. "Thank you for dinner. It's been a while since anyone cooked for me." "It should happen more often," David said, his voice lower than usual. "David," she hesitated before continuing, "I need to tell you something. Today, when I was coming back from work, I was thinking about everything that has happened in the last 2 months, and I realized I have never been this happy." He looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean? You know when you go through life thinking you're content, but you're really just settling? That's how I was living. Work, home, television, sleep, and start over the next day." Sarah smiled sadly. "You guys turned my whole life upside down, and at the same time gave it a meaning I didn't even know was missing." "Sarah, David started, but she interrupted him. "Let me finish. I know you feel bad about depending on me, but I need you to understand one thing. You are not a burden. You are a gift." David was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "I have never felt so cared for by someone who didn't have to do it. And Ethan, he smiles more in 2 months here than he did in the last year. And you, do you smile more too? I smile differently. Before, I smiled when I closed a deal, when money came into the account. Now I smile when I wake up and see Ethan playing in the yard, when I come home and smell your cooking, when we sit and talk like this." Sarah felt her heart race. There was something in the way he spoke, in the way he looked at her, that stirred something in her she hadn't felt in years. "David, we need to be careful." "Careful about what?" "About this that is happening between us. You are in a vulnerable situation, and so am I. We might confuse gratitude with other things." David turned completely toward her. "Do you think that's what I feel? Gratitude?" I don't know what you feel. I don't even know what I feel. Then let's figure it out together without rushing. The next day, a Friday, David woke up determined to resolve the situation with Robert once and for all. He had enough evidence of the embezzlement and had located the bank account of Tech Solutions USA. It was time to confront his former partner. "I'll go with you," Sarah said when he told her about his plans. "No, it's dangerous. If he is capable of stealing, he might be capable of other things." "That's exactly why you won't go alone." Her voice brooked no argument. "Besides, I understand the paperwork as much as you do now. I can be useful. And Ethan? Ms. Brown next door loves him. She takes care of him." The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon at the office Robert maintained in Botafogo. David called, pretending to be Marcelo received a call from a potential investor interested in the projects of Tech Solutions USA. "Robert, this is David. I need to talk to you about some business." "David, man, it's been a while. How are you?" "I heard things haven't been easy." "That's why I want to talk. Can we meet this afternoon?" Sure. Come to the office. Maybe we can find a solution for you." When he hung up, David looked at Sarah. He agreed, and from his voice it seems he has no idea what we discovered. Even better, element of surprise. In the afternoon, dressed in their best clothes, David in the only suit he still owned, Sarah in a business dress she had bought years ago, they headed to downtown. In the taxi, David mentally reviewed the main points he wanted to address. "Nervous?" Sarah asked. "Very. This man ruined 3 years of my life, and who knows how many other people he deceived. Then let's stop him from doing this to anyone else." The office of Tech Solutions USA was located in a modern building with a view of the bay. Robert greeted them with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A man in his early 40s with graying hair, an expensive suit, and an expression that Sarah immediately classified as fake. "David! And you brought company." He extended his hand to Sarah. "Sarah Johnson. She is my financial consultant." "Pleasure. Please have a seat. Would you like water or coffee?" "Let's get straight to the point, Robert," David said, opening the folder he had brought. "I found out about Tech Solutions USA." Robert's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he composed himself. "Found out what exactly?" "That you and David created this company to siphon money from our partnership. I have all the evidence here." David placed the spreadsheets on the table. "David, man, are you crazy? What is this story about siphoning?" "Here it is," Sarah interrupted, her voice cold and professional. "Systematic transfers from your company's account to Tech Solutions, always related to services that were never rendered or equipment that was never delivered." Robert looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. "And what are you a financial consultant for? Because as far as I know, David is in a tough spot." "I'm a consultant in figuring out when someone is lying," Sarah replied, unfazed. "And you are lying." The tension in the room became palpable. The confrontation in the downtown office ended tensely, but victoriously. Faced with the evidence presented by David and Sarah, Robert initially tried to deny everything, then threatened, and finally negotiated. Sarah's presence had been crucial. Her calmness and technical knowledge completely destabilized the former partner, who clearly did not expect to face someone so prepared. "You can't prove anything in court," was Robert's last card, already visibly nervous. "We can," Sarah replied, methodically organizing the papers. "We have the bank statements, the fake invoices, and the record of phone conversations you can't even imagine exist." It was a partial bluff. They didn't have recordings. But Robert's reaction confirmed that there was much more rotten in that story. 2 weeks later, at the beginning of June, a call from David's lawyer brought the first good news in months. Robert had agreed to return a significant portion of the siphoned money and transfer his shares of the original company to David, thus avoiding a criminal lawsuit. "It's not everything that was stolen," the lawyer explained, "but it's enough for you to start over without doubts." That night, Sarah prepared a special dinner to celebrate, but she noticed that David seemed strangely thoughtful. "You don't seem happy with the news," she observed, serving the fried rice that had become one of Lucas's favorite dishes. "I'm happy, yes. It's just that—" David hesitated. "Now that I have the means to leave here, I don't know if that's what I want." "What do you mean?" "Sarah, these months here have changed who I am. The idea of going back to an apartment downtown, hiring a nanny for Lucas, living in that gilded solitude, doesn't appeal to me anymore." Lucas, who was listening to the conversation while playing with his food, interrupted. "We're not leaving here, right, Dad? I like our home." "Our home?" David smiled. "Yes, our home, yours, mine, and Aunt Sarah's." Sarah felt a pang in her chest. She had also gotten used to that dynamic, too, that feeling of family. But she was afraid that now, with the money back, David would realize he no longer needed her. "Lucas, let the adults talk," she said gently. "Go to your room and play for a little while." When they were alone, David took her hand across the table. "Sarah, I need to ask you an important question." "Go ahead." "Would you be willing to work with me at the company, not as a favor, not as gratitude, as a partner?" She stared at him, surprised. "David, I don't understand anything about technology." "But you understand people, organization, detecting problems where I can't see them, and most importantly, you know how to keep your feet on the ground." He gently squeezed her hand. "I want to rebuild the company, but differently, smaller, more human, more honest, and I want to do it with you. But I don't have money to invest. You already invested. You invested in me, in Lucas, when no one else believed it was worth it. Now it's my turn to invest in you." Before Sarah could respond, Lucas ran back into the room. "Aunt Sarah, Aunt Sarah, the lady from the yellow house is at the door." It was Miss Johnson, the community's party planner, with a wide smile and contagious energy. "Hi, my dear. I came to invite you to the neighborhood block party next Saturday, starting at 6 in the evening." "Oh, Miss Johnson, I don't know if—" "No, I don't know. You've never participated in the community parties. Now that you have a family," she waved to David and Lucas, "you have to come, and you are both invited." Lucas jumped excitedly. "A block party? Dad, can we go, please?" David looked at Sarah, who seemed embarrassed. "If Ms. Johnson wants to—" "Great, then it's decided." Ms. Johnson clapped her hands. "Sarah, can you make that pumpkin dessert of yours and your husband?" She looked at David with curiosity. "Does he know how to square dance?" "He's not my—" Sarah began to explain, but Miss Johnson had already left, waving cheerfully. The following Saturday, 24th Avenue was transformed. Colorful banners connected one house to another. Makeshift stalls sold corn pudding, corn cake, and spiced cider. Music played square dance, and people danced in the middle of the street closed to cars. David felt completely out of place at first. Accustomed to corporate events in five-star hotels, this neighborhood block party made him uncomfortable. But watching Ethan run among the children, playing fishing games and trying to ring toss, and seeing Sarah genuinely smile for the first time in weeks, he began to relax. "First, spiced cider," offered Mr. Thompson, the retired neighbor. "I don't drink much." "Oh, come on. Spiced cider at a block party isn't a drink. It's a tradition." 2 hours later, David was in the square dance circle, tripping over his own feet and laughing like he hadn't since childhood. Sarah, by his side, patiently guided him through the steps with good humor. Step right, swing, look out for the snake, it's a trick. I don't know what any of this means, David shouted over the music. You don't need to know, just follow the rhythm, Sarah replied, laughing at his confusion. Ethan watched everything from a distance, sitting on Ms. Brown's lap, an elderly lady in her 80s who had become his new friend. Ms. Brown, my dad is really happy, the boy commented. I can see that, my dear. It's been a while since I've seen him like this. Do you know my dad? Ms. Brown looked at the boy attentively. What's his full name, sweetheart? David Augustus Johnson. The lady placed her hand on her chest, moved. Oh, my goodness, David Augustus, son of Dr. Fernando Johnson. I think so. My grandpa was named Fernando, but he died when I was a baby. Ms. Brown stood up, still carrying Ethan in her arms, and walked toward where David was dancing. David! David Augustus! He stopped dancing, intrigued by the lady calling him by his full name. I'm Marietta Brown. I worked for your family when you were a child. David stared at her for a moment, trying to locate the memory. Then his face lit up. Mrs. Brown, you took care of the house when my mom traveled. That's right. My goodness, how you've grown. And this is your son? Yes, Ethan, just like you were at his age. Stubborn, curious, and in love with block parties. Ms. Brown smiled. Do you remember that every year your mom would throw a party in the backyard? I do. You made corn pudding and peanut candy, and you always wanted to help in the kitchen. She laughed at the memory. Your mom said you would be a chef when you grew up. Sarah observed the scene, noticing how that encounter was affecting David. There was an emotion on his face that she had never seen before. Ms. Brown, David said, do you still live in the neighborhood? I've lived up the street for 40 years. After I left your family's house, I never moved again. And would you know if my dad left anything behind? Any documents? Any memories? Ms. Brown looked at him with a strange expression. David, didn't your dad tell you about the bank account? What account? The account he opened for you. When you turned 18, he said he would tell you when you graduated from college, but he died before that. David completed, his heart racing. I have the papers at home. He asked me to give them to you if anything happened to him. But you disappeared, moved away, and I could never find you. Sarah held David's arm, feeling him tremble. Ms. Brown, could you show me those papers? I can, my dear. Tomorrow, if you'd like. Ethan, still in the lady's lap, looked at his dad with shining eyes. Dad, did Grandpa leave a present? For you? It seems so, son. It seems so. That night after the party, the three returned home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Ethan fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from playing, and Sarah took him to his room. When she returned, she found David on the porch looking at the stars. A night full of surprises, she commented, sitting beside him. Sarah, do you realize how strange life is? If I hadn't lost everything, if you hadn't found me on that street, if we hadn't moved here, I would never have reconnected with Miss Brown, and maybe would never discover this account from your dad. It's not just the account, it's... All of this reminded me of who I was before I became obsessed with success. My dad always said that the most important thing was to be a good person, to have roots, to take care of those we love. David looked at her. I had completely forgotten that. And now? Now I want to be the man he would have wanted me to be. And I want to be that man with you and Ethan by my side. Sarah felt her heart race again, but this time she didn't try to suppress the feeling. David, are you sure about what you're saying? I am. And you? I've never been so scared and so sure at the same time. They sat in silence for a moment, the distant sound of the block party still echoing down the street. Tomorrow we'll go to Miss Brown's house, David finally said. Tomorrow, Sarah agreed. But both knew that the real treasure wasn't waiting at the neighbor's house. It was right there, in that moment, on that porch, in that unlikely family that destiny had brought together. The Sunday dawned cloudy with an air. A heavy sky hinted at rain. David woke up earlier than usual, his mind agitated by the revelations of the previous night. The discovery that his father had left something for him stirred feelings he thought he had buried years ago, along with his childhood memories. Sarah was already in the kitchen when he got up, preparing coffee with her usual silent efficiency. There was something different in her posture, a tension he couldn't decipher. "Good morning," she said without turning around. "The coffee is almost ready." "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Sort of." Sarah finally turned around, and he noticed pronounced dark circles under her eyes. "I was thinking about our conversation last night." Before they could continue, Ethan appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas with messy hair. "Good morning. Are we going to see Grandpa's gift today?" "Yes, champ," David replied, lifting his son into his arms. "But first, let's have breakfast, and you need to get ready." At 10 in the morning, the three of them walked to Miss Brown's house, an old but well-maintained building, painted canary yellow with blue accents. She greeted them at the door with a warm smile, wearing a floral dress and an apron that smelled of cinnamon. Come in. I was waiting for you. I made a fresh cornbread." The living room was small and cozy, filled with photographs in golden frames and antique furniture that told decades of stories. Miss Brown disappeared for a few minutes and returned with a shoebox tied with a red ribbon. "I've been keeping this for you for 40 years, David. Your father made me promise to deliver it personally." With trembling hands, David untied the ribbon. Inside the box were documents carefully organized in plastic folders, some old photographs, and a sealed letter with his name handwritten on it. "Dad, open the letter," Ethan urged, curious. "Hold on, buddy. One thing at a time." First, David examined the documents. There were bank statements from a savings account opened in his name when he turned 18, with monthly deposits his father had made for years. The accumulated amount, with interest and adjustments, was substantial. Not a fortune, but enough to provide complete financial stability. "Oh my God," Sarah murmured, looking over his shoulder. "Your father deposited money into this account until the year he passed away. He never told me anything about this." "Your father was very private," Miss Brown recalled. "He said he wanted to give you independence when you were mature enough to appreciate it." David picked up the letter, his heart racing. His father's familiar handwriting brought a wave of emotion that nearly overwhelmed him. "My dear David, if you are reading this letter, it means I did not have the opportunity to personally give you this gift. This account represents not just money, but my trust in the man you will become. I hope you use these resources to build something truly your own, something that brings good to the world and satisfaction to your soul. Always remember, true success is not measured only by what we achieve, but by what we leave behind and the lives we touch. Be a good man, my son. The rest is a consequence. With all my love, Dad." David had to pause, reading twice, his voice choked. Ethan, sensing his father's emotion, moved closer and held his hand. "Grandpa was nice, right, Dad?" "He was the best man I ever knew, Ethan." Sarah discreetly wiped her own eyes. There was something deeply touching about seeing David reconnecting with his roots, rediscovering values that the rush of adult life had buried. "Ms. Brown, how can I thank you for keeping this for so long?" "You don't need to thank me, my son. I promised your father, and a promise is a promise." The lady smiled. "Besides, seeing you happy like this is reward enough." The walk back home was silent, each lost in thought. Ethan played with a small photo that David had let him choose from the box. an image of his grandpa smiling in the garden back on 24th Avenue. Reality began to set in. David now had resources to start over, to rent an apartment, to regain a comfortable life. But the prospect, instead of making him happy, seemed to weigh him down. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said after Ethan went outside to play in the yard. "I know, about the proposal to work with you at the company." "Not just about that. About us." Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her hands crossed. "David, I thought a lot last night, and I think we need to take it slow with these things." "Why?" "Because you just found out you're not broke anymore. Because in a few days your life is going to change completely again. And I don't want you to make decisions out of gratitude or emotional confusion." David sat next to her. "Do you think that's what I feel? Gratitude? I don't know, and you don't know either. That's why I think it's better for you to sort out your financial life, your company, your home first. Then we can see." "What if I don't want to figure it out alone? What if I want to figure it out with you? Then you can come to me in a few months and we can talk again." The pain in David's chest was physical. "Are you asking me to leave?" "I'm asking you to be sure of what you want, and to give me time to be sure of what I want too." At that moment, the phone rang. It was David's lawyer with updates on recovering the money stolen by Robert. "David, I have good news. Robert agreed to transfer all the money by Friday, but there's a catch. He wants a final meeting to settle some bureaucratic details." "What kind of details?" "Contractual issues, asset transfer, those things. Nothing major, but it's important that you be present." When he hung up, David turned to Sarah. "I need to sort out some things." "Pending issues with Robert until Friday." "Great. You'll have time to get organized." "Sarah, please, don't make this seem so simple." "It's not simple. That's why it needs to be done right." The following days were tense and filled with a melancholy that neither of them could completely hide. David spent his mornings organizing documents, making calls to accountants and lawyers, planning the next steps. Sarah left in the morning for job interviews and returned in the late afternoon with discouraging reports about the job market. Ethan, with the sensitivity of children, sensed the tension between the adults and tried, in his own way, to keep them united. "Aunt Sarah, you're not leaving when Dad gets a new apartment, right?" "I'm not leaving, my love. I'm going to keep living here." "But we're not going to be a family anymore?" The innocent question cut through the hearts of both adults. "We're always going to be family, Ethan," said Sarah, hugging the boy. "It's just that sometimes families don't live in the same home." "That's adult nonsense," declared Ethan with all the wisdom of his 6 years. On Thursday, a day before the final meeting with Robert, Sarah received a job offer to work as a caregiver for an elderly woman downtown. The salary was good, the hours flexible, and the family seemed respectful. "It's a good opportunity," she told David during dinner. "Really?" "The job is easygoing, close to the subway, and Ms. Smith seems like a very sweet person." "And when would you start?" "Next Monday." David nodded, stirring his food on the plate without eating. "That's great. I'm happy for you." "Thank you." Ethan looked back and forth between them, clearly frustrated with the forced politeness that had replaced their previous lively conversations. "Are you guys fighting?" he finally asked. "No, son, we're not fighting." "Then why are you talking like strangers?" Neither of them knew how to respond. That night, David stayed up late in the living room, looking at the plants on the balcony he had helped care for, at the sofa where he had slept for months, at every corner of that home that had become more of a home than anywhere he had lived. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing the old robe she put on every night. "Can't sleep?" "No. And you?" "Me neither." She stepped closer. "David, I want you to know something. The last few months have been the best of my life. And if things were different... But they're not, are they? They're not. You have a future ahead, a business to rebuild, a son to raise. And I have a simple life in the neighborhood. And why does that have to be a problem? Because sooner or later, you'll realize that different worlds are hard to reconcile. And that will be worse for everyone. David watched her for a long moment. You're scared, aren't you? Very scared. Of what? Of getting used to a happiness that isn't meant for me. Sarah. No, let me talk. I'm a 53-year-old housekeeper, without a college degree, without much to offer. You're a businessman, smart, still young. No matter how much we like each other now, reality hits eventually. And what if the reality is that I need you, that I'm a better person with you than without you? Sarah felt her eyes welling up. Then you come looking for me in a few months and prove it. The next day, David would prepare for the meeting that would definitively close the most difficult chapter of his life. But it seemed that by doing so, he would be opening another, even more painful one. Friday dawned with a heavy sky that perfectly mirrored David's mood. He dressed with special care for the meeting. The suit was impeccable, courtesy of Sarah, who had ironed it the night before without saying a word. It was as if every everyday gesture had gained the weight of farewell. "Dad, you look very elegant," Ethan commented during breakfast, trying to keep the light atmosphere that always characterized that table. "Thank you, champ. It's an important day for Dad." "And then you're coming back home." The simple question created an awkward silence. Technically, that home wasn't David's. In a few days, he would have the means to rent an apartment, repurchase furniture, rebuild an independent life. But the idea of leaving there felt like a monumental mistake. "Of course he'll come back," Sarah answered for him, but her voice sounded forcedly cheerful. "Dad just needs to take care of some work things." The lawyer's office was in the downtown area, in a commercial building that David knew well from the golden days of his company. When he arrived, he found Robert already waiting, accompanied by his own lawyer, a middle-aged man with a permanently stern expression. "David," Robert greeted, extending his hand with forced cordiality. "Shall we settle this quickly?" "Let's." The meeting started tense. Robert tried to downplay what had happened, speaking of misunderstandings and misinterpretations of the numbers. His lawyer was drafting terms that sought to limit his client's liability. "Look, David," Robert said at one point, "let's be practical. I'll return the money, you keep the company, and we each go our separate ways. No hard feelings, no lawsuits, no drama." "No admission of guilt either?" David's lawyer asked. "Exactly. It was all a big administrative misunderstanding." David looked at the man who had been his partner, who had frequented his home, who had known Ethan since he was a baby. The ease with which Robert was negotiating the return of stolen money, as if it were just any commercial transaction, revealed a coldness that shocked him. "Robert, do you have kids?" The question caught the former partner off guard. "I do." "Why? How do you look at them knowing you stole a child's future?" "David, don't dramatize. You're going to get your money back." "It's not about the money. It's about what you did to the trust that I deposited in you. It's about what you did with 3 years of work, with the dreams we built together." Robert sighed, visibly uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't want things to get to this point, but when I saw the company was in trouble, I only thought about protecting myself." "Protecting yourself by stealing? Securing my future, you would do the same in my place." "No, I would never do that." The fundamental difference between the two men became clear at that moment. For Robert, relationships were transactions. For David, they were human bonds that carried moral responsibilities. After 4 hours of negotiation, the final terms were settled. Robert would return 80% of the misappropriated funds, a significant amount, though not the full sum. In exchange, David would not pursue criminal action and would accept a confidentiality clause regarding the details of the agreement. "It's the best we could do," explained his lawyer as they left. "With a criminal case, it could take years to see any money, and you still risk not proving everything. I know, it was the right decision." But as he walked through the streets of downtown toward the subway, David did not feel victorious. He felt empty. He had recovered financial resources, but lost the illusion that he could judge people's character. And most importantly, he knew that upon returning home, would it still be his home? He would find a situation that hurt more than any business betrayal. When he arrived in the neighborhood, it was almost 7 in the evening. The home smelled of roast beef, and he could hear voices in the kitchen. Upon entering, he found a scene that surprised him. Sarah, Ethan, and an unfamiliar woman sitting at the table, chatting animatedly. "Dad!" Ethan ran to hug him. "Look who came to visit us. It's Emily, Sarah's daughter." The woman stood up to greet him. Emily was about 30 years old, with curly hair like her mother's, and a warm smile that resembled Sarah's. "Nice to meet you, David. My mom has told me a lot about you and Ethan." "Nice to meet you, Emily. I can only imagine what—" "Your mom said only good things," she smiled, "and true from what I can see." Sarah approached, drying her hands on her apron. "How was the meeting?" "Resolved. I'll receive most of the money by next week." "That's great." Her joy seemed genuine, but there was a sadness in her eyes that she couldn't hide. "Emily came to help me organize some things." "What kind of things?" "Mom told me about the job offer downtown. I came to help her prepare," Emily explained. "And I also wanted to meet you two, who have become family to my mom." During dinner, David observed the interaction between mother and daughter. The admiration Emily had for Sarah was clear, as was her concern for her happiness. "Mom, are you sure about this job?" Emily asked at one point. "You seem so happy here." "Work is work, sweetheart, and this is a good opportunity." "But what about happiness? That counts too." Sarah glanced quickly at David before responding. "We adapt, right? It's part of life." After dinner, when Ethan went to watch TV and Emily helped Sarah with the dishes, David stayed on the porch, watching the quiet movement of the street. It was a scene he had learned to love. Children playing on the sidewalk, neighbors chatting on their doorsteps, the slow rhythm of life in the suburbs. Emily joined him a few minutes later. "Can I say something?" "Sure." "My mom has never been as happy as she has been in the last few months, and I've known her for 30 years. David looked at her, surprised by her frankness. "She hasn't talked much about you two, but she didn't need to. Just look at the way she smiles when she talks about Ethan, or how she changes when you come home." "Emily, I don't know what happened between you two, but I can see that you're separating out of fear, not lack of feeling. Your mom thinks it's better this way. My mom has spent her whole life taking care of others and forgetting to take care of herself. First, she took care of my grandpa, then me and my brother, then other people's kids." Emily paused. "She deserves to have someone taking care of her too." "She doesn't want me to take care of her." "She does, but she's afraid you'll give up when you realize she's just a housekeeper." "That's ridiculous." "It may be ridiculous to you, but for her, who has heard her whole life that her place is to serve others, it isn't." David fell silent, processing Emily's words. "What do you think I should do?" "Prove to her that you won't give up. That when you say you want a simple life in the neighborhood, you really mean it. That when you talk about partnership, you're serious." "And how do I prove that?" Emily smiled. "I have some ideas." When Sarah joined them on the porch, she found the two of them talking in a conspiratorial tone. "What are you two talking about?" "About the future," David replied, a new spark in his eyes. "Our future." "David, Sarah, give me another chance. A chance to prove that I know exactly what I want." "Mum," Emily interjected, "at least listen to what he has to say." Sarah looked at both of them, sensing she was about to be won over by a loving conspiracy. "Go ahead," she finally said. "Not here. Tomorrow, there's a place I want to show you. Is that okay?" "What place?" "It's a surprise. Do you trust me?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "I trust you." "Then tomorrow morning we'll go out. The three of us. Me, you, and Ethan." That night, for the first time in a week, the home regained the warm atmosphere that characterized it. Ethan fell asleep on the couch between Sarah and David while watching a movie, and neither of them had the heart to wake him up to take him to bed. "He'll be fine like this," Sarah said, adjusting a blanket over the boy. "He will, and the people too." It was the first affectionate phrase they exchanged since the beginning of the week, and both felt how painful it had been to deprive themselves of that emotional intimacy they had built together. "David, I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want to hurt myself either. We won't hurt each other. We'll be happy, I promise." "You can't promise that." "I can, because happiness isn't about having certainties. It's about choosing to face uncertainties with the one you love." Sarah looked at the man she had met on the street just 4 months ago, who now occupied a space in her heart she didn't even know existed. "All right," she whispered. "Let's see what you have to show me tomorrow. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for teaching me that it's worth taking some risks." Saturday dawned with a clear blue sky that seemed to promise new beginnings. David woke up with an energy he hadn't felt in weeks, determined to show Sarah that his intentions were genuine and lasting. The destination he had chosen was not by chance. It was a place that represented everything he had become in the last few months. "Where are we going, Dad?" Ethan asked during breakfast, excited about the mysterious outing. "It's a surprise, son, but I'm sure you'll like it." Sarah watched David with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. She recognized that sparkle in his eyes. It was the same one that appeared when he was planning something important, but this time there was a tenderness she couldn't ignore. "At least tell me if I need to dress up more," she asked, looking at her simple outfit, a navy blue blouse and a black midi skirt. "You're perfect just the way you are," David replied, and there was so much sincerity in his voice that she felt her cheeks warm. The first destination of the morning was a surprise even for Ethan, David's childhood home in the historic district. The property, a 1950s construction with preserved architectural features, had been closed since the death of his parents and was being managed by a real estate agency. "Was this your house?" Ethan asked, impressed by the wrought-iron gate and the garden that, even in its abandoned state, still retained some traces of its former beauty. "It was. I spent my entire childhood here." David opened the gate with a key he had retrieved days before. "And this is where my mom used to host the neighborhood block parties that Miss Brown mentioned." Sarah remained silent, observing every detail of the property. The house had a wide porch overlooking the city, large windows that let in abundant light, and a spacious backyard with a century-old mango tree at its center. "Why did you bring us here?" she asked as they walked through the empty rooms, where only the echo of their footsteps broke the silence. "Because I want you to see what I plan to do." David stopped in the main room, where there was a stunning view of the waterfront. "I'm going to renovate this house and turn it into the headquarters of my new company. Here, a management consulting firm focused on helping small and medium businesses get financially organized and avoid the mistakes I made. His eyes sparkled as he spoke. I want to work with people who really need help, not with big corporations that just want to get richer. Ethan ran around the backyard, enchanted by the spacious area. Dad! Dad! There's a tree house here. That's where I used to play when I was your age, David smiled. My dad built it with his own hands. Sarah approached the kitchen window, imagining how that space would look after being renovated. There was something comforting about that house, a sense of home she hadn't experienced since her childhood at her grandma's house. And you want me to work here with you? I want you to be my true partner. 50% of the company, decisions made together, equal salary. David positioned himself beside her. And I want you to live here with us. David, let me finish. He gently took her hand. I don't want an employee. I don't want a babysitter for Ethan. I don't want someone to take care of me. I want a life partner, someone who will build with me, dream with me, make decisions with me. But I don't have the qualifications to be a partner in a consulting firm. You have something much better. Common sense, life experience, the ability to see what I can't. David pointed to the view from the window. How many business people do you think can detect a scam like Robert's? How many can organize a family's finances on a housekeeper's salary? How many know how to turn a house into a home? Before Sarah could respond, the sound of a car stopping in front of the house interrupted the conversation. Through the window, they saw an elegant woman getting out of an Uber, looking at the address on her phone with a confused expression. Strange, David murmured. I wasn't expecting anyone. When they reached the front door, the woman was already at the gate. She was blonde, well-dressed, in clearly expensive clothes, and her posture exuded confidence. When she saw David, her face lit up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. David, I finally found you. David's blood ran cold. It was Jessica, his ex-wife. Jessica! His voice came out higher than usual. What are you doing here? I came to pick up my son, of course. She walked through the gate as if she owned the place. Wow, you've lost so much weight. And this place, is this where you're living? Ethan, who had been playing in the backyard, stopped upon hearing the familiar voice. For a moment, he froze, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Mom? Jessica dramatically opened her arms. My love, how you've grown. Mommy missed you so much. But Ethan didn't run into her arms. Instead, he approached. Sarah held his hand, looking at Mom with a mix of confusion and hurt. You came back, the boy asked, his voice small and uncertain. Of course I came back. Mom just had to take care of some business in Europe. But now everything is sorted out, and we can be a happy family again. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Jessica's sudden arrival changed everything. As much as she had begun to believe in the possibility of a future with David and Ethan, the presence of the child's biological mother complicated everything drastically. Jessica, we need to talk. Privately. David said, his voice tense. Sure, we have a lot to discuss. 3 months is a long time to be away from family. Jessica finally noticed Sarah. And you are? Sarah, she replied simply, not going into details about her role in David and Ethan's lives. Oh, the housekeeper. I'm glad David found someone to take care of Ethan while I was away. The comment hit like a bomb. Sarah felt as if she had been slapped in the face, and David saw all the insecurity he had tried to combat in her eyes return. She's not a housekeeper, Ethan said, with the brutal honesty of children. Aunt Sarah is part of our family. She takes care of us when you left us alone. Jessica seemed genuinely surprised by her son's response. Sweetheart, Mommy didn't abandon you. Mommy just went to solve some important problems. What problems were more important than Ethan? Sarah asked, her voice low but filled with a firmness that surprised everyone. Jessica looked at Sarah as if she had lost the right to speak. "Sorry, but I think family matters are none of your business." "They are," David interjected, clearly positioning himself on Sarah's side. "She is, in part, of our family." "Our family?" Jessica laughed, but it was a laugh devoid of humor. "David, have you lost your mind? Your family is me and Ethan. It always has been." "No, Jessica. My family is who stayed with me when I needed it. My family is who took care of Ethan when he cried for you every night. My family is who helped me discover who I really am." The discussion was becoming more heated, and Ethan began to cry softly. Sarah immediately crouched down to his level. "Hey, sweetheart, how about you show Mommy the treehouse while the adults talk?" "I don't want to," Ethan said, clinging to her leg. "I want to stay with you." The scene broke Sarah's heart. The child was clearly confused and scared by the situation, and she didn't know how to protect him without complicating things further. "Ethan needs to stay with me," Jessica said, her voice growing firmer. "I am his mother." "Being a mother isn't just giving birth," Sarah replied, standing up. "It's being present, it's caring, it's prioritizing the child above all else. And you think you can give me lessons on how to be a mother?" "No. But I can give you lessons on how not to abandon a child when they need you the most." The silence that followed was heavy and charged with tension. Jessica looked at Sarah with a mix of anger and surprise, clearly not expecting resistance. "David," Jessica finally said, "we need to talk, alone." "No. What you have to say can be said in front of Sarah." "This is ridiculous. She's a housekeeper." "She is the woman I love," David declared, surprising even Sarah. "And if you want to talk about Ethan, she has the right to be part of that." In conversation, Jessica was momentarily speechless, then laughed nervously. "You must be joking. 3 months away and you're already in love with the housekeeper?" 3 months taking care of your son," Sarah corrected, her voice controlled but firm. 3 months teaching him to read better, taking him to the doctor when he had a fever, comforting him when he cried for you. 3 months being the mother you chose not to be. The truth of Sarah's words echoed in the silence of the yard. Ethan continued to cling to her, making it clear where his emotional loyalty lay. "I came back," Jessica said, her voice now less certain. "I came back to get my son and rebuild my family." "Came back for what?" David asked. "What changed in Europe?" Jessica hesitated, and in that hesitation, everyone realized there was more to the story than she was telling. "Things didn't go as I expected." "What things?" I thought I could start a new life there, but I couldn't adapt." "Or the guy you went to meet dumped you," David said with brutal clarity that surprised even him. Jessica's face turned red. "How dare you? Jessica, for God's sake. Do you think I'm an idiot? You didn't go to Europe to handle business. You went after Paul, that businessman you met last year." The truth finally came out, and with it, the revelation that Jessica hadn't returned for love of family, but out of convenience after her plan had failed. Ethan looked at his mother with an expression that mixed disappointment and understanding beyond his years. "Mommy, you didn't come back because you wanted to be with us?" Jessica knelt in front of her son, trying to win back his affection. "Sweetheart, Mommy always wanted to be with you. But you left when Dad needed help." "It was a difficult situation, Ethan." "Aunt Sarah didn't leave when things got tough," the boy said with the relentless logic of childhood. In that moment, Jessica realized she had lost much more than she had imagined during her 3 months away. She had lost her son's trust, her ex-husband's respect, and most importantly, she had lost the right to return as if nothing had happened. The confrontation was far from over, but one thing was clear. The family that Sarah, David, and Ethan had built together. The silence in the backyard of the house in the historic district was broken only by the distant sound of city traffic. Jessica knelt before Ethan, who watched her with a seriousness impossible for his 6 years. Sarah held the boy's hand tightly, feeling the subtle tremor that betrayed his nervousness, while David struggled to find the right words for a situation he never imagined he would face. "Ethan," Jessica finally said, her voice softer. "Mommy knows she made a mistake, but now I'm back and we can start over." "Start over how?" the boy asked. "Are you going to leave again when it gets hard?" The question hit Jessica like a sharp arrow. She looked at David, seeking support, but found only a determined expression she did not recognize in the man she had once married. "Son, this isn't a conversation for kids," Jessica tried. "It is," Sarah gently interjected. "Ethan has the right to understand what's happening with his family." "His family is me and his dad," Jessica exploded, standing up abruptly. "Not you." "Then where were you when he had pneumonia at the end of April?" Sarah's voice was low but filled with a strength that made Jessica step back. "Where were you when he woke? Up crying for you? Where were you when he asked every day if Mommy didn't love him anymore?" Jessica stammered, clearly at a loss for words. "Aunt Sarah stayed with me at the hospital," Ethan said, his voice small but firm. "She sang to me when I was scared. She taught me how to make the oatmeal you used to make before you left." Each word from the boy was like a silent accusation. Jessica realized she had completely underestimated the impact of her absence and the bond that had formed between her son and that woman. "David." She turned to her ex-husband, trying one last card. "You can't be serious about this." She waved dismissively at Sarah. "You've always been ambitious, always wanted to get ahead in life. And now you're going to throw it all away for an extraordinary woman," David interrupted her. "A woman who taught me what really matters in life. You're blinded by gratitude. She helped you when you were at your lowest. It's natural to confuse that with love." "Jessica, you're right about one thing. I've changed. And I've changed because I finally understood that having everything means nothing if you don't have anyone truly by your side." Sarah watched the discussion with a tight heart. As much as David's words moved her, Jessica's presence brought all her insecurities to the surface. Who was she to interpose herself between a family? Who was she to deprive a child of his biological mother? "David," she said softly, "maybe we should talk about this more calmly. Jessica is Ethan's mother." "No!" Ethan clung more tightly to Sarah. "She can't take you away. You promised you wouldn't leave like she did." The boy's desperate declaration broke the hearts of everyone present. Jessica, for the first time, seemed to truly understand what she had lost. "Ethan, my love." She tried to approach again, but her son recoiled. "I don't want you to take Aunt Sarah away. I like our family the way it is." Jessica looked around. At the backyard, where her son had been happily playing just minutes before, at the house that could have been hers, at the life she had abandoned for an illusion. When her eyes met Sarah's, she saw not the threat she had expected, but the mother her son needed and whom she had chosen not to be. Are you happy?" she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. "We are," David replied without hesitation. "For the first time in years, I know what it is to be truly happy." "And you?" Jessica turned to Sarah. "Are you sure you want this? To raise another woman's child, to live with a man who has been married before, to give up your simple life for all this complication?" Sarah looked at Ethan, who was watching her expectantly, then at David, whose eyes conveyed all the love and hope she had learned to recognize. Finally, she looked at Jessica. I'm not raising another woman's child. I'm raising my child too, because love isn't about blood or documents. It's about being present, about choosing to stay, about prioritizing the happiness of those you love above your own. And what about the rest? My simple life has never been richer than it is now, and the complications, well, they're worth it when you have a real family to face them with. Jessica nodded slowly, and for the first time since she arrived, her smile seemed genuine. Can I see Ethan sometimes? Not to take him away, just to not lose him completely. Of course, Sarah replied before David could speak. He needs to know his story, to know where he came from, and you are part of that. But with one condition, David added. Ethan comes first, always. If you show up in his life, it has to be to add, not to confuse or hurt. I understand. Jessica knelt down again before her son. Ethan, can you forgive Mommy for leaving? The boy looked at her for a long moment. I can, but you can't do that again. I won't, my love, I promise. And Aunt Sarah stays. Jessica looked at Sarah, then at David, and finally at the son she had learned to love in a way she never could. Aunt Sarah stays. 3 months later, the house in the historic district was unrecognizable. The renovation had restored all the original beauty of the property, respecting its architectural features while adapting it to house both the new consulting business and the family that had settled there. The office operated on the ground floor, with a meeting room. The cozy reception maintained a professional atmosphere without losing the human touch that characterized the work of David and Sarah. On the first floor were the family's private rooms. Johnson and Smith Consulting had quickly become a reference in financial management for small businesses. The combination of David's technical expertise with Sarah's practical sense proved to be a successful formula that they themselves had not anticipated. Ms. Johnson, the 3 o'clock meeting has arrived, announced Rosa, the secretary they had hired, a young woman from the historic district whom Sarah had insisted on giving a chance. Thank you, Rosa. Please send them up. Sarah was still surprised when she was called Ms. Johnson in a professional setting. She had completed an intensive business management course and discovered that her practical experience was worth as much as any academic theory. Ethan rushed into the office, still in his school uniform. Aunt Sarah! Dad! Guess what? What is it, my love? Sarah automatically checked to see if he had hurt himself on the way home from school. The teacher said my essay about family was the best in the class. What was the topic? David asked, appearing at the meeting room door. My special family. I wrote about you two, about Grandma Brown, about Mom who visits sometimes. Ethan counted, on his fingers, and about how a real family is, who stays together even when it gets tough. Sarah and David exchanged glances, touched by the boy's maturity and wisdom. And there's one more thing, Ethan continued, mischievously. The teacher asked when you two are going to get married for real, because I always say you're married, but she saw that Aunt Sarah doesn't wear a ring. Sarah felt her face heat up. It was a conversation she and David had been postponing, both too happy with the life they had built to worry about formalities. And what did you say? David asked, amused. That I'm going to ask you today at dinner. That night, after dinner, a tradition they kept religiously, with everyone gathered at the table sharing about their days, Ethan went straight to the point. So, are you going to get married or not? Sarah almost choked on her coffee. Ethan, marriage is a complicated decision. Why? You love each other, live together, work together, take care of me together. What more do you need? David laughed at his son's simple logic. He's right, you know. David. Sarah Johnson. He stood up from his chair, and to her total surprise, knelt beside her chair. Will you marry me? Are you crazy? Kneeling in the kitchen without a ring in front of Ethan. I'm completely crazy. Crazy for you, for this life, for this family. He took her hand. And I don't need a ring or a special place. I just need your answer. Say yes, Aunt Sarah, Ethan urged, bouncing in his chair with excitement. Sarah looked at those two people who had transformed her life so completely that sometimes she didn't even recognize the woman she was before meeting them. The 53-year-old housekeeper who walked alone through the neighborhood had become a businesswoman, a mother, a loved and respected woman. Yes, she finally said, tears streaming freely down her face. Yes, I want to. Ethan shouted with joy and threw himself into their embrace. Now I can call you Mom instead of Aunt. You can call me whatever you want, my love. The important thing is that we will always be together. Always, always. Always, always, David promised. 6 months later, in a simple ceremony in the backyard of the house in the historic district, with the presence of neighbors who had become family, clients who had become friends, and Jessica, who arrived with a beautiful gift for Ethan and a sincere apology to Sarah, David and Sarah formalized a union that had already been sealed long before, that morning when she decided to reach out to two strangers on the street. Ms. Brown, at 83 years old, was chosen as the maid of honor. Because she was the one who kept Grandpa's dreams until we were ready to fulfill them, David explained. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked if there was anyone who opposed this union, Ethan solemnly stood. Up from the front row, "I oppose," he declared, causing a concerned silence. "Ethan," Sarah whispered, mortified, "I oppose delaying their kiss. It's already time." The backyard erupted in laughter, and the officiant, smiling, declared, "By the express order of the sun, you may kiss." That November afternoon, while they danced in the same backyard where David had played as a child, where his father had planted the century-old mango tree, where Ethan now ran with the neighbor's children, Sarah realized that she had found much more than the love of her life. She had found her place in the world. "What are you thinking about?" David asked, gently twirling her to the sound of Mr. Thompson's guitar. "That life is funny. I spent 50 years thinking my place was taking care of others' lives, and I discovered that my place is building a life together with the people I love. And do you regret anything?" Sarah looked around, at Ethan playing with the other kids, at Miss Brown telling stories to anyone who would listen, at the house that was now hers, at the man she had chosen to share not just love, but dreams, fears, responsibilities, and joys. "I regret not leaving home earlier that morning," she finally said. "That way I would have found you a few minutes sooner." David laughed, holding her tighter against his chest. "I think we met at the right time, at the time when we were all ready." "Ready for what?" "To discover that family is not who is born together, it's who chooses to stay together." While the sun was setting over the historic district, painting the sky with golden hues that reflected in the windows of the house as the small celebration continued, it was a celebration not just of a wedding, but of a second chance that transformed into true first love, of losses that became gains, of an end that revealed a beginning. Ethan, tired of the games, approached his parents. "Can I sleep in your room tonight? It's a special day." "Of course, my love," replied Sarah, carrying him in her arms. "Every day will be special from now on." "Why?" "Because now we have a real family." "We've always had one," said Ethan with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Since that day you found us on the street." David and Sarah exchanged glances over the boy's head, knowing he was absolutely right. The family had formed in that first gesture of generosity, in that instinctive decision to reach out to someone in need. The rest had just been life confirming that the best treasures truly come from the most unexpected places, at the most improbable times, through the most unlikely people. And that sometimes, to find everything we've always been looking for, all it takes is the courage to stop and help a stranger on the street. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. If you watched until... Now comment "I watched until here" and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very exciting.